we're now going to jump into a panel discussion. I'm like, I know we're jumping. It's hard to move, right? It is. It's almost like hard to move from one to the next, right? Because there's so much from Mona Lisa getting us started and Centauria and Renee and, Karani, like there's just a lot that's happening. So we're going to bring up and we're going to ask Milagros, please, to join us. Burgos from Chicago. Zenetia Henry from Georgia. Yes. Zenetia Henry from Georgia. Andrea Clark from Detroit. And Sherry Nolan from Mississippi and Chicago combined. Please to come on up and join us. Ty's good, isn't she? Look, I'm looking at the program book, and one of my dearest friends and colleagues, Natanya Quendo, isn't able to join us, but I know Natanya would love nothing more in the world than to be facilitating, this panel discussion. What we're going to do is we're going to engage with folks and hearing from them, and then we want to really then open it up, for some questions and answers. And when that time comes, if you have a specific question for one of the panelists, please, you can, just ask the panelists. We'll have the panelists respond. And what we'll try to do is get as many questions in, but I will say that if we don't get your questions in, we'll be following this time here. We'll have a break. So there'll be an opportunity for you to continue catching up with folks and having a chance to meet with each other. To get us going, one of the things is their bios are all in the program book. So I would ask you to really go through that. But I'm going to say, before I start, good morning, Miss Roxanne Cook. And Roxanne, I was talking about you earlier, and I was telling folks to make sure when you get here, get a chance to meet you as well. Welcome, and always great to see you, Roxanne. I'm going to ask each of you if we can take, if it's about 90 seconds to 2 minutes at the most. And I'd love for you to just introduce yourself to the audience. And maybe we'll start, maybe Milagros, we'll start with you and we'll just go down. So folks can just introduce yourself to the participants. Thank you.
Hi, everyone. My name is Milagros, as Mr. Robert introduced. I just want to thank you all for being here. I want to thank the good Lord for allowing me to be here and for putting everyone that's here in my path. I want to thank my husband as well. He's been my pillar. I lost my daughter, Alexandra Amani Burgos, on October 19, 2014. She was killed by a stray bullet when she was picking up my younger son. Since then, I started the movement that I thought I would never start. This is a club that no one wants to belong to. The grieving of your child, the grieving of someone that you love. So I started my daughter's foundation, Amani Dream Angel, because she gave me 18 years. They say that when we talk about our child, they give us a few minutes, right? But they don't realize the love, the years that child, that person gave you. So this is why I'm here. I'm her voice. I'm everyone's voice. And I'm glad to be here. Thank you.
Thank you, Milagros. Sherry. Sherry gonna get me afterwards.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Sherry Campbell Nolan. I reside in Chicago, Illinois. I moved to Chicago, Illinois from Jackson, Mississippi, over 20 years ago. My son, Akeem Kennedy Nolan, was murdered last year, July the 7th, 2021. As I represent on my shirt, he was number 76 to be murdered that year in Jackson, Mississippi. 76 represents something. What I understood going through the airports back and forth, handling business, over 4 weeks before I could see my son, over 4 weeks before I could bury my son, is people would not remember his name. People really wasn't impacted by what happened until I said he was number 76, okay? For me, I'm new to this position. I wasn't new to working in the communities with change. I was not new to understanding in our communities of color, you're either a part of something or you're a part of the problem. I never wanted to be a part of the problem. I always wanted to be a part of the solution. So from breast cancer awareness, cervical cancer awareness, HIV, STD, and violence prevention, I was that individual. I moved to Chicago, Illinois, and I had one thing in mind. I had 3 sons that needed their mom. They were in Mississippi, where I felt they were safe because of community, family, and I believed in that village, okay? And in Chicago, I was working with a lot of your truly at-risk youth. A lot of people say that they work with at-risk youth. I tell them it's a difference, you know, because a lot of times the definitions are a little obscured. And working with the students that I was working with in the alternative schools, it taught me that you have some resilient young people that have not been given the opportunity that my children and other people's children, people who be talking about, I don't know what's going on with these young people today. Well, they're not given the opportunities that our children have been given. They have not been given the morals and the values. And so I began to work hard on violence prevention because living in Chicago, violence was upticking. And during that time, I understood I had 3 sons, 3 kings that I was responsible for, okay? I had 3 sons that they had what they needed. Now it was up to me as somebody who lived in the community, and I didn't just work in the community and then go live in the suburbs. I lived in the community. My first community that I lived in was the Wild Hundreds, is what they call it. I lived on 111th and King Drive, from 111th to Vernon. I moved from 1 block to around the corner. And in that, I understood that I did not want my children to become a victim of homicide. So in order to not allow that to happen, so I thought, was to indulge myself and work with others who didn't have the same opportunities, okay? And I did that so diligently. And then after a while, in a lot of the work, and I was privileged to work with some of the original ceasefire members in Chicago. And if you all are from Chicago, you know what that means. Those individuals, those brothers said, we're not letting her go out in those streets by herself. And initially we didn't have any funding. I just had a vision that we needed to do this. And in that work, what we found is intervention is the key. Prevention is an afterthought, but intervention, that's in the very beginning, is key. We did that work, and what we found out some years later, funding did come, but what we found out was politics. The very thing that you all have spoken about, politics, is the barrier to the murders in our communities, whether it's in Chicago, Illinois, whether it's in Jackson, Mississippi. So in Jackson, Mississippi, we're gonna fast forward. I stopped doing the work because I got tired of going to funerals. When the last young man was murdered in Chicago and he was shot multiple times, execution style, Daniel was his name. I met him at Winnie Mandela Alternative High School. Daniel, before he was killed, he asked me, he said, Miss Sherry, you talk about change. I'm ready. I'm ready. I'm tired of being on the block. I'm tired of not doing anything. And what I found out then is I had no network to put Daniel in. 3 weeks later, Daniel was assassinated. Then is when I said, no more. Then I looked at also Well, my kids are grown now. My son's my baby boy. I think at that time he was 18, 19 in college. So, okay, Sherry, you've done your job. You got them out of the way. So I thought. Fast forward, July the 7th, 2021. Between 5:30 and 6, I started getting phone calls and people would hang up because they realized I didn't know. My son was murdered between 3 and 4 o'clock in the morning. Everybody knew before I knew. It was on Jackson's news. And I'm just now seeing the clip 2 months later. Another mother sent it to me where they announced him as number what? 76 on the homicide for this year. I never heard that, okay? That changed my world. And the organization Saving Ourselves, Akeem and I came up with that name some years ago because Akeem also suffered from juvenile diabetes. And he wanted to educate community and young people about what that was like. So initially it was Outreach Unlimited. He said, because Mama, you do everything, okay? We're not looking at just one cause. I almost died of COVID, March 2020. And when I came on the other side of that, I'm still dealing with a lot of the aftermath. They call us long haul survivors. But when that child, Akeem, realized his mom had survived that, he said, man, Mom, he said, now you're doing something else. You're educating people about COVID. He said, I think right now it's time for a change on our name. And I said, okay, son, what should that be? He said, Mama, think about Katrina. What happened? Nobody came to save our people. We had a lot of family in New Orleans. He said, so I think it should be Saving Ourselves. So Saving Ourselves was birthed. I had to call the IRS and say, hey, can we just change that name from Outreach Unlimited to Saving Ourselves? The lady said, sure. Can you tell me a little bit about it? And when I told her, she said, I'm excited to see where that's going because I like it. And so I'm honored and it's a privilege to be here. Miss TK from Atlanta, Georgia. We've been communicating via internet and everything and stepped out on faith. She asked me, she said, Sherry, hey, we need you. We having a Taking Back Our Community event in Atlanta, Georgia. We need you to come. Now, did I tell y'all I don't have a budget? Okay, I told you that, right? I said, sure. And I thought about it. What am I saying sure to? And anyway, we worked out the details later on, which also drew us closer together. But going to Atlanta and participating with what she was doing was one of the best things I could have done because I joined another sisterhood of different women from different organizations. It wasn't about, I think I was the only mom in that group besides Miss Henry that had lost, well, not lost, had a child killed due to gun violence. So, and then in Mississippi to back up, when Akeem was killed, I then realized that I had the ability of bringing people together. And so in that, I started a support group called Purposely Driven. And that's a group of moms and fathers and families of gun violence victims. So all of that to be here today. And I say, I feel very honored and it's a privilege. This is my first year attending, and this is my first year being with most of the moms here. And I feel like I'm connected to all of you already. Thank you.
Thank you. Zenetia Henry, Georgia.
Good morning.
Morning.
I'm Zenetia Henry, and I'm originally from Waynesboro, Mississippi, and I now reside in Marietta, Georgia. I too had my son taken from me April 26th of 2019. I hesitate because I don't give that date any energy. I don't say that date very often because there's nothing to celebrate for that date, because that day was the worst day of my entire life. I am a 24-year educator. At the time, I was 22 years in, and I remember leaving work that day excited as I could be. And that afternoon, I got the most horrific call that I could have ever gotten. And as I drove to the hospital to try to figure out what in the world am I about to walk into, it was like I was in a million places at one time, but standing still all at the same time. So to walk into the hospital and my son not even there yet gave me a little hope. Well, the few minutes later when they rolled him in, I was able to still see him before life totally left his body. The next time I saw him, he had no life in his body. And as my husband and I stood over his body, and my husband shut his eyes, I can remember thinking to myself, what now? In January of 2019, I started an organization, Operation Recovery. Now, Operation Recovery, due to me being an educator and loving children, loving the community, and understanding what relationships can become when parents have children who see a different way of living than what you have taught them and raised them to be, or tried to direct or steer them away from. That was the heart of Operation Recovery in the beginning, was to reunite and be a support for parents and children with estranged relationships. Well, April of 2019, we were catapulted into a much deeper area. As I walked out of the hospital that night, I heard God say, Zenetia, stay focused on the mission, stay focused on the assignment. And I knew then that my assignment was to really push to support grieving parents. The very next day, I started looking for support groups. I could find none anywhere in Wayne County or in the surrounding areas. And I said to myself, I know that I am not the first one that has gone through this. Where in the world is the support? Well, from that moment on, I said, you know what? I can't find it. Let's start it. I'm a solutions person. We can look at a problem, but I'm not going to stay stuck on that problem. At that moment, at that moment and this moment as well, and for the rest of my life, I was a grieving mother. I was a mother that needed somebody to help me at that moment. I needed somebody to tell me, what am I looking forward to? What's going to happen tomorrow? How can we fix this? I knew it couldn't be fixed because I couldn't get my baby back. My son was 22 years old, minding his own business, being the cheerful, carefree young man that he always was. And we would always joke about it. And especially after he was murdered, we say, you know what? I think that kid was just an angel sent through, because he brought joy to everybody's life that encountered him. So I knew my mission and my goal in life is to, number one, keep his name alive. Dre lives through me. I carried him. For 9 months, I carried him in my womb. And I did everything for 2. When I ate, I had to think about what I was eating because he was growing inside of me. Whenever I drank, I knew I was drinking, and whatever I was drinking was going to go into him as well. Whatever I did it for 2. In April of 2019, that was snatched away from me. Unfairly snatched away from me. And I try hard not to ever say lost, because lost means I had something to do with that. I didn't lose my son. My son was taken away from me. His life was snatched from me, my husband, all of us that loved him. So I try not to say lost, I say snatched. So in April, when his life was snatched away from me, I knew then that I carried him in my womb for 9 months and I did everything for 2. But for the rest of my life, I will carry him in my heart and I will do everything for 2.
Yes.
So what I do through Operation Recovery, I do for my baby Dre, I do for myself, but I do for every other parent that's going through this, that has already gone through and didn't realize there is support out here. And for every parent that will come after me, sadly, and it hurts all over again every time I hear or I get a call or I look at the news and somebody else has been snatched onto this horrific journey. And one of the things with Operation Recovery is we are supporting grieving parents in every possible way that we can. Not only are we supporting grieving parents, but we are trying hard to push for interventions and prevention programs to help our youth and give them something better to look forward to, give them opportunities. When my son was taken, I had actually, when I saw him being his fun-loving self and deciding that he wanted to mingle with people, that I just wasn't sure. You know, I didn't understand. And I sought out or I looked for help and avenues and different things that he could get involved with. And I found nothing. So that's another push for Operation Recovery. So I'm here today. Thank you to Miss TK, who is definitely, I can't say enough about how awesome she is and what she does. She does it from the heart, who connected us with Mona Lisa and this beautiful organization that has really, really been a great support. So thank you all for having me today. Me and my baby Dre and I are so excited to be here. So he lives through me. Dre lives through me.
Andrea Clark.
Is it still morning? Good morning, everyone. I want to say, first of all, thank you to Mothers Against Violence, MJE, the board of directors leaders. You have inspired me this morning. Your words went deep. And so I want to say thank you for that. Every time I've attended this conference, I went home more empowered. I started Mothers of Murdered Children in 2011, 3 months after I lost my only son, Darnell. The organization took off really fast, faster than I could process it. For 9 years, I worked that organization with 234 mothers under me, walking with me, I should say. And we'll get into the sustainability piece, which is why we're here in a minute. But this work is not for the faint at heart.
Definitely.
So just thank you for having me here.
Part of this discussion today is how did you build, your organizations from the grassroots and knowing the purpose and the reason why. Just to go through with everybody, where was the support, or where did you go, or who provided some of the initial support? I know that as you're saying you were looking, and not having it and had to figure it out yourself. But as everyone was getting organized, where did that support come from? Was it from an organization or from people? And how is that wisdom and that advice helpful for each of you? And maybe, Zenetia, I'll start with you and then we'll go down if you don't mind.
Actually, in the very beginning, the support I was looking for was guidance. And with starting Operation Recovery, the heart of it was really started with my church family, New Vision Baptist Church, and my pastor, Pastor Ricky Chambers. He actually was a great push. And I had a couple of other mothers. And I like to say the founders or the foundation in Wayne County, Miss Carrie Dixon, who also, she was actually the first one in Wayne County to really start to move after her son was murdered. She started having Stop the Violence walks, and this has been, I think this one will be actually the 9th or 10th year. I'm sorry, I don't know the exact date, but it's been quite a while. And she started, so she and my aunt Sherry Morgan and my uncle Styron Morgan, their daughter was murdered, and she with domestic violence. Those two women actually started movements, and they took me under their wing. They grabbed me and supported me and pushed me and opened up every platform that they had for me. And from there, I was actually introduced once I moved to Georgia. I was introduced to Miss Sylvia Bennett Stone, who I am now the state lead for Voices of Black Mothers United for the state of Mississippi, and which has been a phenomenal support and really for resources and everything that I need. Voices of Black Mothers United has been a great, great support.
Thank you. Thank you. Milagros.
I think God gave me my support. Without the support of Lord Jesus, I don't know how I would be here. Then the thought and the life of my daughter gave me also the support. The doctors had told me when my husband and I first got married that we weren't able to have kids. 12 years later, I was blessed with Alexandria Amani Burgos before I had a miscarriage. When someone took her life, just like you said, because our kids were taken by someone that shouldn't have easy accessibilities to a gun. The person who took my daughter's life, it's still unsolved. I don't know who that person is. I do know that what we do, what I do, is for purpose. It's for the purpose of tomorrow. It's for the purpose of our children to have a future and goals, just like my daughter. My daughter was a freshman in college, and someone took her dreams and goals away. So this is why I walk each day with faith. I'm not perfect. My husband could say that. But I walk in faith, and I walk because I want my daughter's legacy to live. I want all our kids' legacy to live. And I do what I do. I don't forget her, and I'll never forget my daughter. I had her for 18 wonderful years. So I live by her, just like you said, we live by our kids, by the people we lost, by our nephews and nieces and grandkids. I don't have any grandkids. I have a son. He's younger. My daughter and son were 17 months apart. They were like two peas in a pod, I tell you. They told me things after the fact that I was like, how dare you keep that from me? You know? And I just thank God that he blessed me with my daughter. 17 months later, he blessed me with my son, never thinking I would have another child. So this is why I'm in this journey. Because I have a purpose. Through my pain, I find purpose.
Yeah.
Through my struggles, I'll
Mhm.
find strength.
Mhm.
Because this is why we're here. This is why you thank Mona Lisa for bringing us miles, miles away to come to one place in Boston to find that purpose, to be that voice for our child, and for one another, for each other. Because collectively, we could make change. And I believe that. My daughter's logo, Amani Dream Angels, is no dream there's no dream that is not possible. And I want to tell everyone here, there is no dream that's not possible. We have a scholarship for my daughter, Andrea Amani, scholarship fund from the college she attended, because we feel that we have to be that future for our kids, and our kids have to believe in themselves. We have to be that pillar to let them know that they have a voice, to let them know not to be silent. That's why we cannot be silent. We have to live for them just like they live for us, and give them that future and give them the goals and let them know, you know what? Tomorrow is possible.
Yeah.
It might not bring my daughter back, but someone's dream is possible. Yeah. And that's what we got to remember.
Yeah.
Thank you.
I'm
I
gonna-
want to say one thing. When I first came here, I couldn't even finish a sentence.
Mm.
I had to read, and we all go through PTSD, right?
Yes.
Because
Yes.
that'll always be because of the trauma that we've gone through. But I had to constantly read, which I still do. I have to have my little notes. But you know what? Today is another day. I have a little piece of paper, but I can kind of remember what I want to say. And that's what counts. Thank you.
Sherry and Andrea, I'm going to go to another question. Where do you go today for your own support or resources or advice as you continue to move on this journey? Maybe Sherry, I'll start with you.
So basically, for support, a lot of the work that I've done is on a national level. And a lot of times, like even being in Chicago, we have a lot of resources in Chicago. Mississippi, the resources are very limited. So what I've always known to do is kind of reach to other organizations, reach to people. Like right now, I've been asking for trauma training for a lot of the moms that I've been working with in Mississippi as well as Chicago, because we need to be in those roles. We need to be in those positions when you're talking about violence interruption, when you're talking about anything around gun violence, we need to be at the table. So a lot of times I'll reach out to some of the people that I've seen in the headlines. I'll reach out to some of the other people, but I've also found reaching out to other states have been a big resource for me. And for me personally, the resources that I have is my network. Like just fortunately, I have a lot of therapists that was already in my life as friends. I also, like she was saying, prayer. Also watching over the years, I've had close to 30 years to watch families go through different things, and always in my mind saying, I hope that's never me. That's why you work hard to try to make sure that that doesn't happen. But even in that, it's still collectively learning, because nothing, I know I was having a conversation the other day, people feel nothing prepares you, but I've had some preparation. I just didn't know what it was for, but it was for this moment. It was for this. And so surrounding myself with the sisterhood and the brotherhood, because the men are very important. When I see the fathers, I know in Atlanta, that was the first time I really saw fathers come out for a march. And seeing that and trying to encourage and inspire the men in the community, because the men are hurting too. They just hurt differently. We carried that child for 9 months, so it's a little different, but it's trying to also be at a place like this. Thanks to Mona Lisa, Mothers Against Violence, to be able to network so that the services that I don't have in my area, my particular area, I can call Detroit and ask Andrea, what y'all doing over there? I can still reach out to Millie in Chicago and say, hey, you know, we got a mother over here. Can you help me get the resources? I can talk to Miss Henry when I'm talking about doing things in Mississippi and saying, hey, what resources do we have collectively? Because sometimes, a lot of times it's outside of us.
Yeah.
Because again, when this happened with me in Jackson, it was nobody there, ground zero. It was nobody doing those things. And so that's too what I sometimes try to provide on my level of being able to, if I see the news, if I see something on Facebook, reaching out directly to try to find out what they need. Because when it was me, again, when I've been over here, everything left. When you're in that position, I forgot everything. I forgot who to call, what numbers they have. It was a fog. And at times I'm still in that fog. So like things like this where we're networking, we're sharing resources, reaching, you know, in and looking at different organizations. But, you know, even with other organizations, we got to strengthen what a lot of those organizations do and do not do for us. Because if I'm a mother that I'm dealing with gun violence and you're talking about you working with gun violence, you need to be able to provide me with resources.
Thank you. Again, for support, resources, advice, where do you go? Where is it for you?
Well, let me just say that the start of the organization was spiritually motivated. It was all God. It wasn't me. So when I first started the organization, the doors were just opening and it was just surprising me. And as the resources were dwindling down, I had to reach out, collaborate with other organizations. And those organizations, for me, came from out of my state. My support was not in my state. Mothers Against Violence, Dorothy Spike Johnson out of Philadelphia, T.O. Hardeman out of Chicago. That's where my strength came from and my resources and my support. So the organization was very viable and it was helping people. So my state started to mimic it, draw the same picture that I had because it was successful. So there's a competition there, right? Nobody's giving you the resources because so many people are vying for those resources. So they were drying up and going in other places. So when I say it was spiritually driven, God never let us want for anything. It was all there. Everything I needed was showing up. And some of the mothers were so empowered that they started, they were strong enough to start their own organizations and foundations under Mothers and Murdered Children. And what I do is I encourage them, I support them, and I guide them toward those resources so they don't have the pain that I had trying to make it sustainable.
What I'm going to do right now is we're going to go into questions and answers. And when we wrap up, I'm going to make sure the panelists have the last word. So if you have a particular question for a particular panelist, and if there is a general question, I might ask one or two panelists to respond so we can just get as many questions in as possible. And before anyone asks a question, if you don't mind just introducing yourself, and it could be the name of your organization and what city. So, but now we open up the floor. Usually takes the first one and then the second one follows. Please, thank you. So the question is, what resources were they looking for?
exactly. Like what do you need like in those situations? And like what you say like we need resources. Oh, I don't want this. But I can use it. I'm just a little awkward. But what does that mean? What would have been helpful for you in those moments?
So like I can say for me, it was, where do we get, where are the support groups? Because I know in a lot of the other fields that I've worked in, it's important to have support, peer support, people who've already gone through what you're going through, to kind of help you be there to guide you. In some situations, it's from an HR standpoint, you got to understand we're in COVID times. So when I talked about my son was murdered July the 7th, I didn't see his body to the end of July. So even in that, where are the resources? Where is the person or persons that is supposed to help me understand why I cannot view my son's body, what that looks like, who is the lead investigator, what's happening with the case.
Right.
In a lot of situations, it wasn't my story, but it's been some of the other moms. A lot of them were not able to go back to work. You got to understand it's a difference. Most of our HR handbooks and HR says that we have 3 days off.
Right.
You're talking about trauma, okay? And you're talking about COVID times. So we made a lot of allotments for COVID, but we haven't made allotments for murder during COVID times. We haven't made allotments of just people dealing with death from COVID and not, having the backlog of people waiting to be processed, in order for them to get them to the funeral home. So for me, it's like I needed a lot of resources. And some of the moms, they don't have anywhere to live because it's one mother, she was a police officer. She was called to the scene of the crime, which happened to be her son laying out there in the streets in Hazelhurst, Mississippi. She was a police officer. And going from being able to take care of yourself to her being homeless and now having to live in a 1-bedroom with her daughter and her other son that's alive, it's having resources. Where do we go? If we can't go back to work, can we use our AFLAC?
Right.
Right. What are the things in place to help us? Because honestly and truly, it's a hurdle for us to be able to go back to what we were doing because we will never be the same. And where do we get, where are these resources at? What can we do? Is it somebody else out there that can offer us employment that looks different based on what our needs are? And how do you pay your bills, when you're not employed? It's things like that for me.
Andrea, you raised your hand. Did you want to add to that?
I wanted to share when we talk about resources, we're talking about, so let's just say we have a grief support group. We have nowhere to hold that group because we don't have the resources to make that happen, right? So that's one resource that we need. The bottom line is nonprofits who are working and running like us, that we need to bring in a lot of other people to help them and to move them forward in their journey of healing. We need funding. We need money. And that's it. And so when you got so many organizations competing for a small pot of money for the resources that they need, when we talk about education, we're talking about moving forward or even in taking that next step in life. Going forward with your education, going forward with raising the other children that you have remaining and remembering the child that was taken from you, right? So we need all kind of resources. We need books. We need those type of resources. And that comes with money. And the money is a major resource.
I'd kind of like to piggyback off of what Andrea and Sherry both just said. Bottom line is money, because for us, when I can speak for myself, and I'm feeling like I can speak for a lot of more. I was 22 years in education. I was 3 years from retirement. But when my son was murdered, I could not go back into the classroom because my heart is always in whatever I'm doing. I'm putting everything in. My whole heart is in. I could not give my children in the classroom what they really needed because of the trauma that I had gone through. So I wouldn't dare go back into a classroom to be a dysfunction to those children that I was supposed to love and supposed to help. But I still have bills to pay. I still have to make a living. But now I've been catapulted into a different area of educating and helping, but I still have to find ways of living from day to day. So again, it goes back to funding and hosting those the support groups and having a place to host them. And when those mothers come in, you want to be able at least to give them some water or something, a snack or something. So it does, bottom line goes back to funds, just having the funds to be able to do when you're called out and say, hey, this parent, this is something Operation Recovery does. We host a virtual support group, but we're going back to, due to COVID, it's still virtual, but we're going back to face-to-face. But we're also moving into where when we have a mother or have a family that has lost a child, we're putting together this survival basket, and we're putting together this basket to take to this family, because at that time, you can't even think about, you just ran out of tissue. You just ran out of dish detergent. So we put together this basket to take in there to where they can just reach and grab. That was, I think about myself, people flooded my house with things that I knew I needed. But at the time, for weeks, I couldn't even go in. I could not walk into a store and pick up what I needed, because by the time I made it to the door, anxiety was almost taking me over. So I forgotten everything I went to the store for. So again, that funding as far as resources and like Sherry was saying, training to be able to say, hey, I'm here. Let me help you walk through this, and being able to know what to do at those times. So those are the resources.
Millie.
I wanted to say the families, of course, they need their resources, because when we lost our child, families and friends were there, but then they forget the aftermath.
Right.
We don't forget the aftermath. And then they say, okay, the resources of finding the person that took your child away. Okay, if we ever find the answer, does that take away our pain? No, it will never take away our pain. So the resources of having someone to be there aftermath, to support the families, support the siblings, and of course, the moms and the dads that are grieving every single day. So we need that support. And of course, just like they say, financially, it's very hard. I know when I personally went to a social worker or a psychologist, and they said, oh, it's a discount. It's gonna be a discount. Yeah, $250 is a discount for an hour. Hello, no thank you.
Right,
Give me a coupon or a coupon,
Mhm.
because that is not no discount.
Right.
So we express what we feel, we express what we need, and this is every single day, every minute and second of our lives. So we need all kinds of resources. And I want to say the siblings, they as well need resources. And this is why I'm also in this, because like I said before, I believe in our kids. We have to believe in our kids. We cannot allow the statistics to say, you know what, this third grader ain't gonna be nothing. That's right. You know what, you are wrong, because this third grader just got a master's, just got a bachelor's, just completed their schooling. And it's not always about education, because everybody, doesn't go after high school to college, but you know what, get a trade. We believe in you getting a trade, making a better you for tomorrow. And I believe in that. I'm now in collaboration with another program, This is our first year. We just enrolled 26 students for medical office assistant through Rincon and the state, so they could have a future for tomorrow. So they know that, you know what, there are people out there that are going to give you an education. Whoever doesn't believe in you, you believe in yourself, but we also believe in you. And that's what we have to teach our children, that there is someone out there to give them hope, dreams, goals, and love. They need love. Thank you.
One thing, we'll have another question, but one thing that is important, as everybody was answering, we were saying that is the important aspect of, if we want to, our local officials, making sure you keep this in front, because they make decisions on budgets. So, you know, city budgets, state budgets, federal budgets. So a lot of this work too is the advocacy. So a lot of work that you're doing around supporting families, but it's how are you building advocates, and how are you also building leaders and telling those stories? Well, as you're saying, you're investing in our young folks, but you're investing in them as still being part of the workforce and others. And again, it's what I was saying earlier, why, I just appreciate so much of what Roxanne and what she does in her work, honestly, where they're investing in communities. They are like hiring, they're investing in training and the resources that are needed. We need to make sure that we see the advocates, if they're in government or the private sector, because that's where the persons are. So I would say to folks, as we're building this model, I know some folks will say, I don't like fundraising. If you don't have those resources, it's hard to run a program. It's hard to get those things. So again, you don't have to be the expert, but then talk to some folks in the room today who have that experience, that have that knowledge, and share it, in some ways. So we'll take, if there's another question.
No.
Four. Thank you. So this is about sustainable grassroots nonprofit. So from a tactical perspective, kind of what Robert's saying too, to give advice to the ones that want to start their organizations, right? And then connect with organizations, even from a government perspective, and then also corporate, and then our community. So our community understands, we get it. How do you sell that? And I hate to use the word sell, but you know how you're talking about funding. How do you tell your story in a way that is tactical, where someone like Roxanne can invest in what you're doing? Because there's a lot of people that talk about what they want to do and they want everyone to invest. I'll just say me. How does a person like me, if I have a corporation, understand when I have 10 portfolios in front of me, this is what I want to invest in? So can you share with us how we do that from a tactical perspective? Do I get an LLC? Do I do a 501c3? Do I do just sole proprietorship? Because we want to share our stories, but we also want to give information that's going to help people do this work when we leave this place, right? So anyone can start. Sherry's looking at me, so I'm gonna start with her.
So it's that tactical approach. How do you tell that story? If you're saying
Yes.
you need to raise money, or folks are gonna ask you, are you a 501c3 or you're a nonprofit? So what advice, or what would you share with folks in doing that?
I mean, for me, it's so with Saving Ourselves, I had not defined whether it was a LLC or a non-for-profit. When you start looking at and you start working with others that help you build upon that, because again, I know none of that. All I know is how to work, how to, if it's a problem, something that's going on in our community that I want to be a part of, I know how to begin that process. And normally in those times, what will happen is somebody will see what I'm doing, the consistency, they'll see what the impact is, and eventually the funding comes. Now for this, I was inquiring, do I need to be a LLC or do I need to be non-for-profit? And the answer was, because of the scope of work that I want to be able to do and to be able to go after some of the funding that's out there, that I needed to be a non-for-profit. And so my question was, okay, so now how do I become a not-for-profit? Because it's a lot of paperwork. And so again, that led into resources. that led into me telling the story about what I wanted to do. And I had to tell that story. I've told that story probably for a year now. And just here recently, I was sharing, I have a young person, a young lady who started a lupus foundation that began to walk me through how to do that. And then I had the fortunate experience after, again, everybody knowing the story of my son and everything that I've done prior to that, where someone picked up the phone and called this young lady that manages different accounts. I think even one of her largest accounts is something with BET. And that young lady called and say, what is it that you're doing? What is it that you want to do? And then she's written everything out from the highs to the lows. She's giving me feedback during that whole process, because it's a couple of other things that I've birthed in this process to try to get resources, to try to bring in dollars. And so she had to give me that feedback of, hey, you want saving ourselves to be out front, steer away from some of the other names. We can talk about that, but that's more peer support. This particular thing, this is going to be your fundraiser item. So, okay, we're going to leave that with a name. So it's having those resources for me. And then it also even learning, like I thought, well, when they want a business address, I can go get a PO box. Well, I learned about that. No, not a PO box. So then I said, okay, so what do you do next? So it's like, well, you go to the UPS store, and the UPS store, you pay $100 for 3 months, and they provide you with an address for you to use. Then the other thing is, no, don't use your personal phone, cell phone, Sherry, for your business telephone number. And I was like, why not? I'm already paying for this. They're gonna be calling me. And they was like, no, that's not the business model. So you either go buy a one of your like Cricket phones, or something with a small contract on it. Or then I also was talking, and Ms. Henry shared with me about using a Google number. But the bottom line is, it was reaching out to kind of find out what it is that I need to be. Because again, I'm used to doing the work. I know what I want to do, but what's going to be beneficial to me, whether it's going to be an LLC or a non-for-profit. And for me, I work for profit, and I work with a lot of for-profit organizations. And so their thing is, we can support you if you become a nonprofit, because it's ways of working together in collaboration. So that's what's worked for me.
Others.
Well, for me, it's still in the process, unfortunately, because of the COVID. Nobody was working in the offices. Everybody was still working from home. But I am not going to give up, because sometimes they say, you know what, how are you going to grow an organization of gun violence? And then, as we all believe, we say, watch me, right? It's been 8 years, and we still are volunteering, and we're still doing what we have to do. They also advise me a 501(c)(3), because it's better to manage. I have another phone, because like she said, it's always good to have another number. Well, I got mine because T-Mobile offered a free line, and I says, okay, I'll take it. So that's my other number of them communicating with me. It's very important that they communicate, whoever you reach out to, because you have to have that communication, that relationship with your community and everyone else. It's unfortunate, when I would go to the schools, some schools, they're in denial of gun violence. So they do not want to listen and think that, you know what, there is a problem. There is a problem of gun violence or whatever it is that we're going through. But you know what, we won't give up. This is why we're here. And this is why I will not give up. I will not give up for my daughter, and I will not give up for the next door neighbor's child. Okay? So by having a non-for-profit, yeah, it's important, but we've done a lot from, our pockets, because God says, you know what, give to those who need. And that's what we do, right? So when when we do get, like for my daughter's scholarship, it goes directly to the college, but I have a dream that we're gonna have a place, and there's gonna be a time where we're gonna delegate everything to everyone else. Right. Thank you.
Well, just to add to that, one thing that I would definitely say is, when you want to start this, or this is something that you've been called into to do, you have to have a plan. You have to know what it is that you are trying to reach and that what you want to do. I can remember when I first started out, I was all over the place. I wanted to do everything. I wanted to stop violence. I wanted to save this one. I wanted to do, it was everything. And my Aunt Sherry was one of the main ones who told me, she said, you got to stop. So having those people who've already walked the walk as that resource is always phenomenal, who's always, can say to you, stop and look at this. She told me, she said, you're going to want to do everything, but you got to focus on one thing. What is it that your heart definitely says? What is God leading you to do? What is your heart saying you want to do? Where's the passion? Focus on that, and then you can branch out from there. So having a plan of knowing, okay, I'm going to focus on this. So then now I'm going to become a nonprofit and my mission will be this, but then I know later I can grow into more things. And then having people in your corner, just like I said, networking is a must. Networking is a major help for being able to learn the things that you don't know, because you're hooking up with somebody who may know something in this area. When the 501c3, I've gone around for probably the last 2 years trying to get that 501c3 locked in, and just actually was able to really get everything all locked in like it needs to be, and filed and stuff. But it took me a minute because I kept getting the runaround from different people, but still networking and connecting with people who know how to do this stuff and what you should do and directing you. So that's super, super important. But having that plan, I would say having that plan is one of the major things of knowing where you're going and what what is it that you are being led to do.
I'm just going to add.
Anything you'd like to add?
Yeah. I just wanted to add that from a tactical standpoint, you have to find the problem, work the plan, and show the solution. For example, like I said, there was no funding available for mothers of murdered children in the city of Detroit. But everything that we needed, we were provided, because God just did that. I never explain it like, in layman terms, but God just did that. The city of Detroit Police Department closed our cold case unit over 20 years ago. That was a problem because you have 20 years of cold cases in a closet. And I'm looking at 20 mothers in front of me saying, I need answers. Yeah. I need someone to tell me who killed my child. I need somebody to, walk me through this process. And so I said, okay, let me see what I can do with this. So I went to the chief and I said, sit down, sit down. I said, we need to reopen the cold case. I said, we have new mothers who are suffering, and we have mothers who have longevity in this journey that need answers, right? So he said, and I explained it to him. And then when I tell you that our chief at the time just opened up the doors for me, he created a task force for the cold case. He asked me to bring him 10 cases. I took him 10 cases. In 3 months, we had solved 5. I worked very closely with those detectives. Every day I went in that office, in that police department, to make sure that they were doing what they said they would do. Make sure that they were calling back the families, bringing in the mothers and saying what they had done that day or that week. So that is, you have to show what you're doing, and you have to ask for what you want in return and the results.
Thank you.
I just had to say one more thing. In corporate responsibility, so there are corporations that have corporate responsibility initiatives that you should look on their websites, get to know them, do some research, and you'll be able to find ones that can connect with you. You have your questions still? Okay, she couldn't remember a question at first, so I jumped in.
And this will be the last, this will be the last question. And we'll have a final word and then we'll go into a break.
Okay, at the end of the day, I don't have a question. At the end of the day, I would first and foremost like to say thank you, Miss Mona Lisa Smith, for having this conference. And this is a resource for each and every one of us in here because we're getting information. To you ladies on the panel, I would like to say that I commend each and every one of you all, and that this is a big pair of shoes to step into, and that every morning that you get up and you step into your shoes, remember that there is nothing that you cannot do that God will not bring you through. And any day, whatever you do, God will see you through it. So whatever you're doing, again, like I say, commend you, continue to do this, and may the force of the Lord be with you all.
Yes.
Amen.
As we're going to wrap up, so thank you. As we're going to wrap this session up, there's a lot of wisdom, experience that was shared. I would strongly encourage folks, as you're thinking, as you're building your organization, if you're having board leaders, board members, board participants, go after those folks that have that diverse set of skills that can help support you. If it is fundraising, if it is storytelling, if it is like grants, if it's the finances, you don't have to have all the expertise yourself.
Right.
Use the power of your network, use the power here, but also back home, there'll be some folks that have those expertise that'll help you and support you for you to do the direct work in the mission. So I'm going to end on this one last question for each of you, and we'll wrap up. As you're moving forward, how are you going to define, or how do you define, I'm going to use the word success, whatever that means. How do you define, or that you're leading on your mission or your purpose? So maybe I'm going to ask folks, and then we'll wrap up on that. How are you defining your organizational success, or that you're working towards achieving a mission?
I'd like to answer that first.
Okay.
So I would say that success is watching mothers stand up straight, watching mothers start their own organizations and foundations, and consulting on those things with mothers. Justice for Jada is my baby. It's Tijuana's foundation, but I watched that baby birth, and I've nurtured it until still today. There are 6 other organizations that came out of Mothers of Murdered Children that I still nurture. And so that they don't have to suffer like I did, I put them in touch with people who can give them the resources that they need, or grant writers. And I give them all of those resources that I didn't have, so that their foundations can be successful.
Thank you. Thank you. Sherry, how do we define success?
Success for me is I started with about 20 women a year ago, and success is seeing those numbers grow and watching the 20 women evolve into their purpose. All of us are joined together by the same or similar events, but it's being able, it's for people to understand that you have your own purpose, and understanding what that purpose is, and working within that purpose as well. And also for the ladies to understand, sometimes it's about sowing seeds. Whatever we didn't have, and that was the one thing that really helped me do what I'm doing. What I didn't have is being able to go out there and try to obtain those things that I didn't have, and to try to be there, the things that I learned, being able to pass those on. So success for me is where a lot of the people, or a lot of the area in Jackson, Mississippi, where people, women and families are saying that they don't have certain resources. Success would be where they'll have abundance of resources and people will be able to say, hey, you need this? Okay, I got this, and I'm gonna put you in contact with this person and this person. So that's success for me, resources and philanthropists coming to the table.
Thank you. Millie.
Yes, exactly. I don't know if it's working. Success for me is establishing, like I said, a relationship with one another, letting others know that you have to lift each other before you go down. You cannot allow yourself to go down. God's lifted me through my whole journey. God's been there. And again, you have to find your resources. My daughter is fully my resource. And I want to read a verse because my daughter was born on March 16th. And there's a verse that we always say, and every year we do a bookmark in honor of my daughter. And I want to read 16. For God so loved the world that he gave his one and only son, that whoever believes in him shall not perish, but have eternal life. For God so loved the world that he gave his only son, that whoever believes in him should not perish, but have eternal life. So my daughter, as long as I'm on this earth, my daughter lives with me. My son will always live with me. My husband, I thank you. Mona Lisa, I thank you, because every time I leave these sessions and these conferences, I always go back home and I said, this is what we want to do. My husband's like, my gosh, you're talking to yourself again. But you know what? Okay, don't be surprised when I talk to myself again. But you know what? I thank God for putting everyone, all you guys in my path. And you know what? I want to say something to Kiwan Jones. Yesterday you said something. Kiwan Jones? Okay, her sister, but your sister, yesterday she said, I don't want to take no one's light. You know what? You tell her she ain't taking no one's light. She has her light because that's why she's here. She's here for a purpose, okay? And she has to speak on behalf of everyone that was lost, and she should not feel guilty on that because she's here for a purpose. And we thank her for being here. And I thank you all for being here.
Great. Zenetia, last word. How do you define success?
I define success. Success to me is seeing a mother that could not face or could not deal with or really couldn't pull herself together one day, but because of a support group that we've sponsored or because of that phone call, that mother is writing books or leading her own organization. What I see, the vision that I see is a tree, the tree of life. And at the bottom of that tree, we have the roots, and that's the pain from and the connection from the loss or the us being snatched onto this journey. But then as we grow, each mother or each, not just mother, because I don't want to leave fathers out, because fathers are important as well, because they hurt just like we do. But seeing these families grow, and this family may grow this way as a limb or a branch from that tree, but they're able to help the people that are in this area. Then this one is growing from this tree. This one is growing, the branches are growing in different ways. Somewhat of what Mona Lisa is doing right here, that tree. We all have the same root pain, but yet because of the coming together, because we are growing right here in this same ground. Operation Recovery's logo is that lotus flower. In the bottom, we are all in this mud, this horrible, dark, nasty place, but we are able to rise up. So seeing that in these families and still loving and keeping their babies alive, keeping our babies alive, but yet helping somebody else, seeing this one that couldn't even breathe today, but 2 days later, or even 5 years later, we're able to, that same person or that same family is able to reach back and say, hey, let me help you. To me, that's success. Success with our young people is seeing our young people grow into who they have been created to be, and less violence, almost to a halt in our communities. That's success for me.
Zenetia, Millie, Sherry, Andrea, let's put our hands together and thank them. Thank them for their knowledge, their wisdom, sharing, opening up. Thank you all. Thank you.